There's been a state monitor for how many years?
There's been a state monitor for the purpose of limited
There's been a state monitor for how long, sir?
Since 2010.
Since 2010, the state monitors has the ability to approve or disapprove of contracts, to work with all collective bargaining, to approve or not approve healthcare costs. I believe in this year's budget he approved healthcare costs covering 1/3 of the year. Pension costs, I believe the pension costs built into Atlantic City's budget with his approval is 6 months out of 12. That state monitor, who seems to have been doing less than a superlative job, at least in terms of analyzing results.
The pilot bill, if it had passed, would have added a certain sum of money that wouldn't have otherwise been anticipated as revenue on the basis of the apportionment, correct? But real simple, how about yes or no? It would have been more money. The pilot bill goes through, it would have been a lot more money for this calendar year for Atlantic City in revenues, yes or no?
It's a little bit more nuanced than that. Assemblyman,
I'm going to let you finish, but that's a simple question, and I think I know the answer to it, and I'd like to hear it. And I guess the other part of that is if during this last 6 years, if we didn't think that Atlantic City was making the tough decisions, why did they get transitional aid? Isn't that the law? You're not supposed to get that aid without making those tough decisions?
My recollection is they only received transitional aid last year.
I'm being informed that transitional aid was given to Atlantic City in 2014 calendar year as well as 2015 calendar year. Would you agree with that statement?
I would have to, I know in 15, I don't recall 14, I would have to look at that.
I believe it's on your website, sir.
I don't necessarily review all the pages on my website. I will look at it.
Second question, if you wouldn't mind. Current state law requires the local finance board to approve the annual budget for a municipality under state supervision. I'm right with that statement?
That's correct.
Although the local budget law requires municipalities to include separate appropriations for statutory expenditures, Atlantic City's state-approved budget for this year does not make appropriations for contributions to the public employees' retirement system and makes only a nominal contribution to the police and firemen's retirement system. The budget appropriates 1/3 of Atlantic City's payments for employee group insurance, state health benefits. The state also permitted Atlantic City to anticipate $33 million in casino redirected anticipated payments, even though the receipt of those revenues were dependent on action by the state legislature and governor. Would you disagree with that statement?
I think the numbers are factually correct. I'm sorry, I didn't hear
the point of fact is that the state monitor seems to have approved budgets which are fiscally impossible, which leads me to the question not about the impossibility of the budget, but in terms of the performance of the state monitor. But as part of our understanding of the issue, we need to better understand what occurred. And it seems to me that the local finance board, which is an extension of the state and its authority, allowed a budget appropriation, approximately 1/3 of payments for employee group insurance, a budget which does not include appropriations to PERS and makes only a nominal contribution to the police and firemen's retirement system, a budget which is at best unfeasible and without basis. Is this what the state put its imprimatur, on?
I think, Mr. Chairman, you're making my case as to why we have to act now.
No, I'm making my case in terms of the state failed to give us an early understanding of this problem, that this problem, if attacked 2 years ago, the results and where we are today would be far different. And which leads me to question why it took so long. The state of New Jersey, which apparently, by any number of recollections, has not fulfilled its responsibilities to the municipality, we're now going to reward the state again by having it involved even more so?
Assemblyman, you're assuming that the authority under a 1947 act gave us the authority to make the hard decisions that have to happen. It did not.
Transitional aid in 2014 and 2015, 1 year following another, only seems to have affirmed from the state's point of view the operations of that municipality. We, in all due respect, sir, respectfully disagree with your analysis, and it seems to be our belief that indeed the state has held the necessary power for quite a while and has simply not exercised it, at least since the imposition of the monitor in 2010.
We're being asked, and you're advocating for a bill that would essentially put the administration in charge of this city. And that's why we have to look at what the administration has done for the past 6 years and allowing this situation to get to the point where it is. In the emergency monitor, I guess, was put in place in January of last year because the regular supervision had not worked out. So we went to another level, the governor did by executive order, correct?
Correct.
And the emergency monitor was put in place to, and he was supposed to issue a report within 60 days with a plan to stabilize the city and finances over the long term. And a report was issued at the end of March, but did not really provide the detailed level that was necessary to actually put a plan in place. That was due in June of 2016, but that report was actually released January of this year, correct?
That's correct.
On the professionals that have been hired since January of last year to deal with this problem by the administration, I'm knowing you have an emergency manager, then an accounting firm that is now was tasked with assessing the financial situation of the city. You have legal counsel to the emergency manager, and then a consultant to the manager to act as a mediator in restructuring the debt, and then a PR consultant that you note was hired by the city, but of course under supervision, the emergency manager would have to approve that hire. And depending on the reports, I mean, this is millions of dollars in expenditures on consultants just in the past year to deal with this situation. And it's a similar pattern to me when I look, Assemblyman Singleton was bringing up and I get cost allocation when you get federal grants, but the fact that we utilized right away the 5% of the Sandy and Irene funds to be dedicated to staff, and yet we've got, $1 billion left on the table and people still not in their homes. And yet we're paying millions on consultants for the AC crisis when you acknowledged to Assemblyman DeMaio that every little bit counts when trying to solve this situation. What have we actually received for that money? I mean, that's my concern. We put so much money into it to be told we have a problem, essentially.
If the monitor did not believe that Atlantic City was going in the right direction, in 2014 they received transitional aid. They submitted a document to the monitor reviewed it, and he recommended aid in 2015. Did he have the ability to not recommend aid in 2015?
Well, we're focusing on a monitor when what we're talking about is a not one person individual decision. So
But the monitor in the position has that authority. Were there any strings attached in the 2015 aid? Was it said, for example, Atlantic City, unless you do the following, we will not give you this transitional aid, or we'll reduce it by X factor?
Again, Assemblyman, the city was running out of money.
Understood.
So the aid was made in order to make sure bills got paid.
I understand, but are you saying that there were no additional strings that were attached to aid in 2015?
2015 aid was in part allocated based upon the emergency manager's report.
We've seen some discussion of Newark and other situations in the discussion points of how the state has been able to use those tools and compel the municipality to do certain things and abide certain recommendations. What's been different, Commissioner, about Atlantic City with regard to consolidation of agencies, with regard to the things that the state could make the city do effectively that we were able to do in Newark that we either chose not to do in Atlantic City or wouldn't be able to do under the existing statutory rubric of the Local Government Supervision Act and related provisions?
I think the main difference has been that more often than not, and much more often than not, it's the ability of the state and the staff of local government services and the leadership in the municipality to agree on the steps that have to be made.
Were those agreements reached in other situations because the city wanted to take those measures, or were they reached because they had to, because they were conditions in Newark, for example, where increasing the tax levy to the maximum levy cap, refinancing the debt service, the Chapter 78 contributions, ensuring that they were being paid, reviewing the trust fund balances, the various other examples actually provided in your discussion point responses, all of these things were within the authority of what can be achieved by the Local Government Supervision Act. So if that authority exists and that authority can be used in Atlantic City to, or could have been used to compel the municipality to act accordingly.
I know my colleague here touched upon Newark, so I represent Newark District 29. I'm just a little disheartened because Newark would have never been able to receive any type of transitional money, not 1 cent, if they didn't adhere to certain things that were put into the Memorandum of Understanding. And I understand what you said, that it has to be a mutual agreement by both parties. However, we both know that that's not necessarily I don't want to say the truth, but it's not necessarily the fact of the matter. The fact of the matter is, if a municipality is going to receive state money, it has to adhere to be able to do certain things in order to qualify. We're talking about taxpayer money. We're talking about money that has to be distributed statewide, not just to urban areas, but suburban areas that are in need. And the past 2 years, Atlantic City has received transitional money in 14 and 15, and yet it has not adhered to, not even remotely, 1/8, a quarter of what Newark has had to do throughout the last couple of years. We can't hire without state supervision. Any new contracts have to be dealt with. So I apologize if I sound like I'm just a little bit angry, which I am, in the sense that we're sitting here talking about what's happened the past couple of years and where we're at now. But I think that every mayor would be disappointed to hear what they have had to have done in the past couple of years in order to receive money. Because when you receive transitional money, there's no mistake that means that you're in dire need. And I think if I could just finish my point, moving forward, if this is the message that we want to give to our mayors, I think that this is a wrong message. And I think that something needs to be laid out and be a little bit clearer, because if we have other municipalities that are doing what they need to do in order to be fiscally responsible and be fiscally on their own and not require supervision, I think there's a lot of discussion that needs to go on moving forward as to what it is that we're going to have these memorandum of understandings really be.